Is the so-called Macarena wing actually illegal, or are Red Bull and Ferrari being accused before the evidence even exists? The source claims a massive FIA investigation, but it does not identify the wing, explain its movement, name the regulation involved, or confirm that either team failed a technical test. Instead, it lists 4 separate FIA stories involving Lewis Hamilton, the British Grand Prix, and Pierre Gasly. That means the biggest shock may not be hidden inside the car. It may be hidden inside the headline. Because if officials prove the wing moves beyond the legal limit, Red Bull and Ferrari could face urgent redesigns, lost performance, and a technical battle that changes the championship. But if no official case exists, the entire scandal collapses. And the one piece of evidence that decides everything is still missing. Subscribe to the channel. To understand whether the so-called Macarena wing is illegal, you first have to understand what the FIA would actually need to prove. Not suspicion. Not unusual movement. Not a dramatic headline. A measurable violation. That means officials would need to identify the component, apply the correct test, compare the result with the written limit, and show that the wing behaved outside what the rules allow. The source provided does not show any of that. There is no confirmed failed test. No official technical document. No named regulation. No ruling against Red Bull. And no ruling against Ferrari. That does not prove the design is legal. It means the evidence required to call it illegal has not been provided. And this distinction matters, because every Formula One wing moves. Air pushes against it. The car vibrates. The structure bends slightly under enormous force. A completely rigid wing does not exist in real conditions. The legal question is not whether movement happens. It is how much movement happens, where it happens, and whether that movement stays inside the permitted limit. Think of a tree in strong wind. The branches move. That does not mean the tree has failed. The real concern begins when the movement becomes greater than the structure was designed or allowed to handle. A Formula One wing is judged in a similar way, but with precise measurements and controlled testing. That is why slow-motion footage alone cannot settle the argument. A camera may show movement. It cannot automatically show whether the movement crossed the legal threshold. Perspective can distort what people see. The angle can exaggerate the motion. The body of the car may move while the wing appears to move independently. And tiny changes can look dramatic when footage is slowed down enough. That creates the perfect environment for controversy. Fans see movement. Rivals see opportunity. Headlines see scandal. But the FIA must see numbers. That is the difference between suspicion and enforcement. And this is where the supposed investigation becomes important. If the FIA truly launched a major review, officials would likely want to understand whether the existing test captures how the wing behaves in real racing conditions. A component can pass when force is applied in one controlled direction, then react differently when air pressure, vibration, steering input, and road movement act together. That does not automatically mean the team designed an illegal system. It may mean the test is too simple for the behavior being examined. This is where the gray area appears. A team may build a wing that passes every official check. Another team may argue that the wing still defeats the intention of the regulation. Red Bull could say the component is legal because it passed. Ferrari could make the same argument. Rivals could say the test does not measure the right thing. And the FIA would then have to decide whether to preserve the current standard or create a stricter one. That decision could change the championship without producing a single disqualification. Because a new test can remove an advantage from the next race onward. No past result needs to be erased. No team needs to be publicly accused of cheating. The governing body can simply say that future components must behave differently. That may sound like a small regulatory adjustment. It is not. A wing can influence the entire balance of the car. It shapes how the air reaches the floor. It affects the rear of the car. It changes how stable the car feels under braking. It can influence tire temperature and straight-line speed. And it can decide whether the driver has confidence when turning into a fast corner. If Red Bull or Ferrari had to make the wing stiffer, the car might lose some of that carefully designed balance. The front could respond more slowly. The car could produce more resistance on the straight. The rear could become less stable because the airflow had changed. And a small loss in one area could force a compromise somewhere else. That is why teams fight so hard over technical interpretation. They are not defending one piece of bodywork. They are defending the behavior of the whole car. But the available source does not confirm that either team was ordered to make such a change. That remains a possibility, not a fact. And this is where the supporting material becomes a serious problem. The source lists FIA stories involving Lewis Hamilton, the British Grand Prix, and Pierre Gasly. Those reports may concern real penalties and reviews. But they do not prove that Red Bull and Ferrari are facing a massive wing investigation. There is no technical connection shown. No shared component. No common ruling. No official statement linking those separate cases. That means the headline is asking the audience to make a connection the source itself does not establish. And once that happens, every new detail must be treated carefully. The phrase massive investigation suggests scale. It suggests several officials, deeper checks, and possible consequences. But how massive is it? How many cars are involved? What exactly is being tested? When did the investigation begin? Has either team been asked to provide components or data? The source gives no answers. Without those details, the size of the investigation cannot be confirmed. The same problem applies to the word illegal. Illegal is not a feeling. It is not a rival's opinion. It is not a suspicious-looking video. It is a technical conclusion based on the regulations. Until that conclusion exists, the correct word is questioned. Examined. Scrutinized. Possibly controversial. Not illegal. That may sound less dramatic, but it is far more important. Because the moment a design is called illegal, the public assumes guilt. Victories become suspicious. Championship points become controversial. Every later inspection feels like confirmation. And even if the FIA eventually clears the component, the accusation often remains. That is the damage created by judging too early. But the opposite mistake is also possible. A team can hide behind the phrase passed every test even when the real behavior exposes a weakness in the regulation. That is why the FIA cannot simply ignore movement that looks inconsistent with the purpose of the rules. Officials must study it. They must improve testing when necessary. And they must apply the same standard to every team. That final point is critical. If Red Bull is checked, Ferrari must be judged by the same method when the designs are comparable. If Ferrari is required to change something, every similar car must face the same rule. And if the FIA introduces a stricter test, teams need clear notice and a clear deadline. Without consistency, the technical battle becomes political. Red Bull supporters may believe the team is being targeted. Ferrari supporters may believe the timing is designed to damage their progress. Rival fans may believe both teams were protected for too long. And the FIA becomes the center of an argument that no technical explanation can easily calm. This is why official communication matters. The governing body does not need to reveal every secret inside the cars. But it does need to explain the basic issue. Which component is being examined? What behavior caused concern? Whether the existing test remains valid? And whether any future change will affect all teams. Without that clarity, rumors become the only available explanation. And rumors always choose the most dramatic answer. A hidden mechanism. A secret flexing system. An emergency redesign. A possible disqualification. None of those claims is supported by the source provided. But they can begin to feel real because the technical details remain invisible. That is the emotional engine behind the story. People are not only curious about the wing. They are afraid that the championship may be shaped by something they cannot see. That fear is powerful. Formula One fans can accept losing. What they struggle to accept is the idea that the rules may not be applied equally. A legal advantage can be frustrating. An illegal advantage feels like betrayal. And uncertainty sits between those two emotions. That is why this story cannot be settled by Red Bull saying the design is legal. It cannot be settled by Ferrari saying the same. It cannot be settled by rivals calling for stronger tests. Only the FIA can define the legal boundary. And based on the source provided, that definition has not been shown. So the real question is not yet whether the Macarena wing is illegal. The real question is whether the FIA has enough evidence to change how legality is measured. That is a much deeper issue. Because if the test changes, a wing that passed yesterday may become unacceptable tomorrow. The team may not be punished for the past, but it may still lose performance in the future. And that future loss could be enormous. Imagine Red Bull relying heavily on controlled movement to protect speed on the straights. A stricter test removes part of that advantage. The car now needs more conventional wing angle to create the same grip. That creates more drag. Straight-line speed falls. Overtaking becomes harder. Defending becomes harder. Strategy becomes more complicated. Now imagine Ferrari facing the same change, but its car depends on the movement in a different way. Ferrari might lose less. Or much more. That is why a grid-wide inspection does not produce equal consequences. The same rule can hurt one team more than another. And every rival would be watching for that. Mercedes would study whether Red Bull's speed changed. McLaren would compare cornering performance. Other teams would inspect their own designs before the FIA ever reached them. The technical battle would spread quietly. No dramatic announcement. No public confession. Just new parts appearing on cars, and lap times beginning to shift. That is how the real consequence may reveal itself. Not through a penalty document. Through performance. But even then, caution would still be necessary. A slower Red Bull would not automatically prove the old wing was illegal. A faster Ferrari would not prove it escaped the same problem. Track layout, temperature, tires, and setup can change everything. The evidence must remain direct. That is the standard the story needs. And right now, that standard has not been met. The source does not confirm a massive investigation. It does not confirm that the Macarena wing exists as described. It does not prove that Red Bull or Ferrari failed anything. And it does not show that either team broke the rules. What it does show is how easily unrelated FIA stories can be placed beside a dramatic technical accusation and made to feel connected. That is not enough to convict a team. But it is enough to create a crisis of trust. And that may become the real battle. Not Red Bull against Ferrari. Not Red Bull and Ferrari against the FIA. The battle between what the public believes has already happened, and what the evidence can actually prove. Because if the FIA later confirms a problem, the scandal will explode. If it confirms no problem, many people will still remember the accusation. And if it changes the test without declaring the old design illegal, both sides will claim victory. One side will say the wing was always legal. The other will say the rule change proves it should never have been allowed. That argument could survive long after the technical issue is settled. Which means the most important decision may not be the ruling itself. It may be how clearly the FIA explains the difference between a clever design, an incomplete test, and a genuine violation. Until that explanation arrives, the Macarena wing remains surrounded by suspicion. But suspicion is not guilt. And a massive investigation is not real simply because a headline says it is.